everyone, and welcome to another edition of the ATACS podcast. This is episode 56 on May 25th, 2019. I am your host, Flex, from Raleigh, North Carolina. Joining me are Ryan from New York. How's it going, Ryan?
It's good. It's good. We are having some very nice weather in this lovely May day.
A whole almost 2 months since we did our last podcast, so weather has improved.
Yeah.
Also joining us from sunny Greenville, North Carolina, is Mr. Will.
That's me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here, and it's sunny, and it's Memorial Day weekend.
It is. We have not 2, but 3 days this weekend without working.
Extra day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pleased.
I am pleased. We have gathered to talk about video games because, as we were discussing before we hit record, we like those. And
it's true.
As I alluded to, it's been a while since we talked about them into microphones, so we're going to do that. And to kick us off, I'm going to ask Ryan what he's been playing.
Well, I have been playing several games. It's been so long. I guess my brain is in a jumble of all the games I've been playing. No, I'm just kidding. So recently, we talked a little bit about this before starting the show, but I just picked up The Messenger, which I don't fully know the story behind this game, but I get the sense that it's sort of like maybe in the vein of like a Shovel Knight or a Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, in that it's kind of trying to hit on some of the nostalgia of like classic 2D platforming.
Yeah, I think the initial pitch, because like Shovel Knight is kind of the Mega Man like update modern take, and then Bloodstained is kind of Castlevania. This one was originally pitched as like comparable to the NES Ninja Gaiden.
Okay. I mean, thematically, it's definitely in that vein. And I think, I mean, I get the sense that maybe there's like, you know, a gameplay loop, like where you can go back and re-explore or something like that. But I think I'm pretty far in, like kind of an initial mainline playthrough. Like I'm in like a glacier area, and I think I'm supposed to be reaching like the top of a mountain of some kind. So who knows what twists and turns will happen, but it seems like in terms of just like a direct main line, I'm actually approaching what looks like it would be sort of a final, quote unquote, final area. And yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying it. I don't think it hits on the nostalgia vein quite, well, how do I say this? How do I word this correctly? It's not clicking with me quite as much as some of those other games did, like Bloodstained or Shovel Knight. And I think that's probably for various reasons. Probably one of the first is I think it might try to recreate some of the jank a little too much. So like I find that like the music is like I have to turn the music all the way down because it's like very like screechy chiptune stuff.
Oh man, the music's the best part of that game.
I mean, I don't think it's awful, but it sounds like, I don't know, the music and the style, it feels to me like in some ways they have tried to capture the old school a bit too much with this game, at least in terms of like audio visual. Maybe that's just me being nitpicky, but like I do remember when I first sat down to it, I was like, ugh, like I'm having to crank my volume down because this is like so like screechy, like.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely lean into that style hard.
Yeah, and I guess I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm kind of enjoying it. There are some things like speaking to like the technical setup. So I picked this game up free on Twitch, and I don't know if this is a Twitch thing or if it's just the game itself, but like I wasn't able to get a controller working with it, which for this game is a huge like. I mean, it's okay playing on the keyboard, but really, like, again, it's kind of like a level of technical jank that just seems like kind of a whiff.
Like that's gotta be a Twitch thing.
Yeah, maybe so.
Can't imagine playing this game like you want to play this with a controller.
Yeah, so I'm playing it with mouse or with a keyboard.
Yeah, that sucks. Steam's page says it has full controller support. I have not played a game through Twitch. That's interesting.
This is the first one. Yeah, it was a free Twitch Prime game. So
I played Red Strings Club, but it was not the type of game that you would need a controller for.
And I played The Messenger on Switch, so at first I was about to say I played it on PC with a controller, but no, I actually played it on Switch.
Yeah, so I guess there's not a lot more to say than that. I mean, it's pretty fun. Like, and I like some of the mechanics. Like, whenever you hit something with your sword, you can kind of double jump off of it. Some of those are kind of neat ideas, but it doesn't feel like particularly revolutionary. And I think, maybe it's because the Ninja Gaiden games were not really part of my gaming history, or maybe it's because I think they probably tried to lean in a little too hard. Whereas, I feel like with a game like Shovel Knight, they made enough smart updates. Maybe I'm just imagining things, but I feel like some of those games that kind of hit the nostalgia buttons a little better kind of secretly modernize a lot of stuff. And just kind of use a more of a trapping. I do think the game is kind of funny though. It like doesn't take itself seriously at all.
No, it does not.
And everything is pretty much just like a cheeky meta commentary on like video games or that type of video game.
Yeah. So I was curious. Have you somehow managed to get this far without knowing what the twist in that game is? You haven't reached that point in the game itself, so you would have had to heard it somewhere else. I'm guessing you weren't on the podcast where I talked about it where I talked about this game because I think I mentioned it there.
No, I mean I won't be surprised if a punchline comes up once I reach like another stage or two because
you would know what the twist is if you've seen it.
Okay, so yeah, I probably haven't seen the twist itself yet.
Okay, so I was mainly curious what you thought of that, but you're not at that point. It's like halfway through the game.
Okay.
Which basically the point that right now you feel like is the end is kind of a halfway-ish point.
Okay, and that's not surprising at all.
Yeah. But so I ended up not finishing this game. Like I didn't really enjoy it that much.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And some people like it more or less after the twist because the design of the game changes. I found myself liking it less after the twist, but some people have liked it more. And I was kind of curious where you'd fall on that. But one of the things about the twist is it made me realize this game is a lot about, like, it's kind of a weird meta commentary on old school game design in a way. And you can see that in its cheeky dialogue, how it comments on that stuff.
Right.
But it kind of leans into that more after the quote unquote twist.
Okay. And I feel like I've heard something. Does this game have like an up-resed mode that happens at some point, or am I just imagining that I've heard something?
Kind of. I mean,
okay.
If you don't care, I'll just say what it is. I just don't know how much you care about me saying.
Well, let me play it. I'm so close. I think I might have a clue based on some but I don't distinctly remember the details. So
yeah. But yeah, the game changes its structure, like it still plays the same, like the way you move and the abilities you have, like all of that stays the same, but it changes its structure and its tone.
Okay.
When you hit that twist.
Cool. I think I'm almost at that point, probably like 1 or 2 subsections from it.
Gotcha.
So anyway, yeah, not a lot to say. I mean, it's cool that it was free and it plays pretty quickly. So yeah, not being able to play with a controller though, I think hurts the game experience somewhat.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It's a bummer.
So yeah, I started playing The Messenger. I guess the other couple things I've been playing recently. So just this Wednesday, or Thursday, actually, I think, I let my subscription for Final Fantasy XIV lapse for a bit. I picked it up and I have played it, pretty heavily for the past month. And the latest expansion, Shadowbringers, is coming up, I think late next month if you pre-order it, or early July if you don't. It's like if you pre-order it, you get to play it like 3 days early or whatever. Yeah, I'm kind of debating on whether or not I actually want to keep the subscription train rolling or just take the month off, and because I think I probably will end up picking up Shadowbringers and resuming and maybe at least playing through the story of that.
Are you playing this with your brother? Or is this
No, I've been rolling it solo. Just kind of.
How many expansions have they had?
So the one coming out in the next month or two, well, in about a month, is the 3rd expansion, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
There was A Realm Reborn, then Heavensward, then Stormblood, which is the current expansion, and then Shadowbringers is the next expansion.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's been pretty fun though. I kind of had, I guess for some context, I kind of had an itch to like level up a character. I had, back in like 2017 through maybe the early part of 2018, I had been playing a lot of World of Warcraft. Took a break kind of before Battle for Azeroth, and just between my brother being busy and like, me starting some new things, I never picked up Battle for Azeroth, which I've heard actually has kind of been struggling as an expansion. So recently I kind of got the itch, and I was deciding between like, well, I've kind of always wanted to play Final Fantasy XIV, and back in like 2013, 2014, I had played like 5-10 levels, and it's like, well, this is fun, but at the time I was like, I don't really want to play this solo. Or like go back to World of Warcraft and maybe like start one of the allied races. Like start a new class as like a Zandalari troll or whatever. So I was like, all right, I'm feeling it. And so I finally made the decision. It's like, okay, well, let's give Final Fantasy XIV a shot. Just, try something a little different. And I've been enjoying it. I've mostly been in kind of A Realm Reborn. Square Enix gave the first expansion out for free. I haven't really reached the level to do much or any of that content, so I haven't got to there yet, but I've mostly just been playing kind of the main story for like levels 1 through 50. Has a few different classes. One of the things that is interesting about Final Fantasy XIV, compared to like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, like some other modern MMOs, is that it's kind of more character focused in a sense than I don't know if I'm saying this right, but in a game like World of Warcraft, you start a character and you pick a class, and that character is that class. Whereas in Final Fantasy XIV, after level 10, you can kind of just switch classes. And so the game 14 kind of encourages you more to stick with a single character than like to roll alts. Like so with my current character, my main class is a Dragoon, and I just got it to level 50 and finished some of the job quests, which is kind of neat. So you have like a story arc for your job. But I, probably because of some of the experience boosting that's happened for the original content, my character kind of got way out ahead of experience-wise from the main story. So, the main story quests were like level 20 and I was like level 40. So I was like, well, I can keep doing this with my main class, but like maybe I should try rolling a second class and just catching that up and then just doing the main story as like a second class. So I've been playing like kind of switching between like a Dragoon as a main class and like a Paladin as a second class. So yeah, it's been interesting. I kind of enjoy it. Like, it does feel similar to other, I guess, modern MMOs that I've mentioned earlier in a lot of ways. But it's interesting to see some of those differences. It has a more realistic art style. Like, it's like a very stylish game, as you would expect a Final Fantasy to be. Like, it has some pretty cool music at spots, and at least at this point in the game, I'm more, I guess, still technically in the base game content, but it strikes me as kind of a slower paced game, like maybe more chill, like, you've got a bit more story focused in terms of the main campaign. And they do a lot of callbacks to the fact that, there was a sort of this event where they rebooted the game. So it's kind of neat to see that has sort of been built into the lore of the game. They call that event, I think, the Calamity, where basically they sort of reset that game world. So yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Cool.
I guess, yeah, I don't really want to dive into like systems and daily rewards and hunting logs and all that stuff. Of course, there are a lot of...
So, like, the way you switch characters, is there a max level for your character, or is it kind of the level per class?
So, yeah, each class has a level. So, my current character is a level 50 Dragoon, a level 40 Paladin, and a level, like, 15 Arcanist.
And what's the max level?
As of Stormblood, it's level 70, and I think they're raising the cap to 80 in the next expansion.
And that's per class, so you could be like level 70, soon to be 80 in every class?
Yeah. Yeah, you could, in theory, I guess, be a level 70 or 80 everything.
Gotcha. That sounds like it would take a long time.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Like, I mean, it hasn't been that hard to get. I haven't been playing like crazy hard to get my 2 to 3 classes up. But yeah, I would say, and I mean, in some ways, it's kind of neat, I guess, like because it's so easy. I guess if you get bored with your main class or you want to try something different, you don't have to roll a new character and start from.
Right.
You have to start that class from level 1, but you don't have to start everything from level 1. So it is kind of neat, like that. If you did sort of start capping out a few things, you could just be like, okay, well now I'll go try a ninja, or now I'll go try like a monk or a red mage or whatever. So yeah. That's been pretty cool. So now I'm trying to decide, it's like, do I hold off and pick it back up when the expansion comes out, or do I just kind of keep it rolling and keep poking it forward? Like maybe try to get up to level 60 with a couple classes and maybe get some new gear and things like that. We shall see.
Yeah.
Then I guess the only other thing I was going to mention is before my Final Fantasy subscription kind of ended for the month I had it, I finished Danganronpa. So I don't think I had
the first one. Trigger Happy
Havoc. Yep. I don't think I've had a chance to talk about that or mention that at all. But that was really interesting.
That's one word for it.
It's I ended up liking it. Although at the end of chapter 1, I was very much in like a, do I really want to play this game? Like, because on one hand, like, I think the characters are kind of, and some parts of the setting were kind of interesting, and that's what I really liked about the game, is like the characters and some of the subplots that happen, and you know, some of the gameplay, like solving mysteries and things like that, was also kind of fun. Was also pretty fun, but at the same time, like, the game's setting is very contrived.
Oh yeah,
it's like, I mean, it's basically like supernatural, in a way that makes it hard to suspend your disbelief. Like, and like, you know, it's also very, like, it's very brutal. And you know, at that point, I was kind of comparing it in my mind with, like, you know, in some ways, Danganronpa sort of echoes something like a battle royale in a sense. Although it's less about like open combat and more about like kind of murder mystery type stuff. And I was thinking to myself, like, well, why do I kind of like battle royale, but I'm, you know, I was a little uncomfortable with Danganronpa, and it's like, well, in my mind, like, battle royale is a little less unbelievable and unrealistic, in my mind, and I guess it's also a little bit more straightforward. So yeah, I don't know. That was an interesting, like, thing about Danganronpa, because I guess to anyone who's listening who's not familiar with the game, basically, and I think this is the kind of the premise on the box, so I don't think this is really spoiling anything. Basically, it's sort of like, I guess it's like almost like a visual novel in a way, where you're playing as a student, a high school student, and you attend this high school called Hope's Peak Academy, but shortly after you arrive, basically this, I guess it's like a mechanical bear, Monokuma, like, shows up, and he starts setting all these rules of how, like, the students, like, need to murder each other and get away with it. Which, yeah, it's like, and then the game also is a bit stylized sometimes in its violence too. So it's very bizarre. But, you know, once you get into it, the actual act of, like, or the actual sort of storytelling, like these different students and their ambitions, and they're also trapped in this school. Like, one of the big motivators for them to kill each other is if somebody commits murder and gets away with it, they're allowed to leave. So the school this high school that you're in is basically like a prison. Like, there are literally like steel plates over the windows.
Yeah.
So you kind of get to learn about these students and their ambitions and, like, why they may or may not want to leave versus being, you know, potentially trapped forever in this prison-like school. And, you know, it was kind of interesting to like think like, okay, well, can I trust this person? Like, you know, are they really like kind of laid back about this whole thing, or like, you know, are they just hiding it to kind of show like a poker face, so nobody will suspect them when something happens? Like, I thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic of the storytelling, like not knowing who to trust or how things would play out. So yeah, I ended up liking it, like getting past that point. You know, I think it kind of, the plot also moves forward a little bit more past that. But
yeah, you're totally right that the set, I don't even remember because I played this game years and years ago, but so I don't remember the details, but the setup is definitely very contrived. But I did enjoy interacting with the characters, and they're all like, the other weird thing about that high school is all the kids are like the ultimate something.
Yeah. Except for you.
Yeah, well, you're the ultimate lucky student, is how they frame it.
The ultimate everyman.
Yeah, but everyone else is like the ultimate athlete or the ultimate... There's one guy who's literally just like the ultimate comic nerd or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone is like the best at something. So they all definitely have like strong personalities and quirks and ambitions, and like getting to know the characters. And then, like you said, the like thought process of like, oh, is this person being straight with me? Can I trust them? Like that kind of stuff is, I found fun to follow. Even as the game gets really weird, the characters are still entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess they sort of had to force the setting a little bit, but the setting itself and the situations that the students kind of like try to work their way out of was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Did either of you play 999?
I did not.
No, I haven't. What is 999?
It's kind of in a similar vein. It's a little older than Danganronpa, but it also has a contrived setup where people, they're not all students in this one, but people get captured and put in this thing they have to escape. The rules are different, but there's a lot of what I liked about that game was like figuring out who you could trust and what was going on, and Danganronpa had a similar appeal to me.
Yeah.
I was just curious if anyone else had played 999.
I guess the only other thing for me to say about Danganronpa is the gameplay is kind of interesting. It's sort of a detective-ish, like courtroom-ish type. I mean, other than like the visual novel piece of it, where you're kind of like walk around and talk to people and like gather clues.
The basic flow of the game is someone gets murdered. You walk around, look for clues, talk to people to try and figure out what happened, and then you get thrown into a like Monokuma puts on like a mock courtroom type thing, and you try and accuse and prove someone did it. And to do that, you play hangman and fire truth bullets.
Some of that was kind of interesting thematically. Like, I mean, like you said, sometimes it ends up being a fairly simplified exercise. Yeah. Like, you know, like at one point in the conversation, somebody is like kind of like acting out and ignoring you. And like, so you play like this little rhythm game to like kind of like shoot down their like, their like contradictions or whatever, or like, but yeah, a lot of the core gameplay is you have these conversations that roll by, and you either have to take clues that you found or like pick certain statements out of those conversations, and then like shoot them at other statements and like try and prove a contradiction, which it's kind of like, I mean, it wears old after a while, but like it is kind of a, you know, a funny little thing. And I guess like I also found that I mean, sometimes I think the wording was a bit awkward, and I was like, I don't quite get what they want me to do here, but a lot of times it did kind of require you to say, okay, well, if I have these 5 clues and there are these like 4 or 5 statements that these people are saying, like I actually do have to know, I have to understand the clues. I have to understand the context. Like the game often rewarded you for paying attention to the evidence that it was showing you, or piecing together like, okay, well, this person thinks that the murder happened with like a pipe, but the victim actually has stab wounds or something like that. It's kind of a neat, if silly or strange gameplay system.
Yeah, it's super goofy. But I mean, I appreciate what they're going for. Like that, parts of that game are contrived and weird, and in some ways don't make sense. But like taken as a whole, that game has a personality to it that I really appreciated, and I enjoyed seeing it through.
Yeah, so that's it for me. Those 3 games are, I think, all I want to cover for today's cast.
Cool. Awesome.
How about you, fellas? What have you been up to? I heard something about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh boy, we'll get to that later. I want to ask Will what he's been playing.
Well,
hopefully, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
No, it's been a minute. So I guess I was trying to figure out whether I should chat about the things I've been playing most recently, or I guess some of the best things I've played over the duration. I don't know if you guys have a particular preference one way or the other.
I think whatever you're most excited to talk about.
What would be the most entertaining? Entertain me, Will.
Well, I don't know about that. I will.
So, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Perfect. So, I guess what I decided on, I think, is I'll talk about 3 of the games that at this point are kind of in the running for kind of like my top 10 on the year. So, just some of the best stuff I guess I've played so far that I haven't talked about on the podcast.
Of the year being 2019?
Yeah, just so far.
So all right. For the record, Will is playing new games.
I'm the only guy who plays the new stuff. So the first one, and 2 of these are very similar, and they're just both right up my alley. So the first one I'm going to mention is the Hong Kong Massacre, which is sort of a top-down shooter with some bullet time aspects to it. Very much in the, I guess you could call it kind of in the same vein as like your Hotline Miami's, in the way that you instantly respawn. Most of the enemies die in 1 hit. You die in 1 hit. Sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I just really, it just feels really, really good. The whole thing just feels fantastic. So you got a couple different weapons you can kind of choose to take in there. And then as you complete these different challenges in the levels, you can unlock different perks for the different weapons to make them a little bit more rowdy, I guess. And there's this sort of hard-boiled John Woo type story in the background that I didn't pay that much attention to. But yeah, I sort of played through the story of it, and then I went back through and tried to get some of these different little medals. There's one for like making every shot that you hit connect with an enemy. And so just being super surgical about it. And that was kind of changed the way that you had to play a little bit, because there's sometimes that you have to break through, cover. Like if some guy's like through a window, and normally the first shot you would shoot would break the window, you kind of need to sort of draw some fire from him so you can make sure that every one of your bullets is connecting. So that was pretty fun. And I think one of the things that I liked a lot about it is that it fixed some of the problems with a lot of the games in this genre. So if an enemy is off screen that you've actually seen, then it's sort of like your game keeps track of him with these set of red arrows, and it'll be like 2 arrows. I think it's 2 arrows if he's particularly close to you, or 1 arrow if he's not, and you'll just see those arrows on the corners of your screen, and they kind of help you keep track of like where the enemies are. Also, as a general rule, the enemies don't shoot until they're visible on your screen, so that it removes some of the like Hotline Miami 2 irritation from enemies shooting you like through windows off screen, and then you're like, oh, I didn't know he was there, and then I have to trial and error my way through this. So I guess being a longtime fan of this style of game, I guess I feel like I've got a good feel for like, you know, how you can make it more playable or less playable or more fun. And I think Hong Kong Massacre has a lot of like good decisions on that front. So
nice. I'm watching some footage right now, a trailer.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of, with 2 pistols, dive through the air, slow-mo kicks in, roll over a table, shoot guys, slide on the ground.
Go. Yeah, perfect. You got it. Got it. That's what you do. And then it feels... And then the last guy that you kill, and everyone, it zooms, pulls down into this close-up view where you get to just see him slow-mo fly across whatever it was that you shot him near. So it's just like it's a romp, but in my opinion, it makes some smart decisions with the whole situation. And
then the trailer ends by saying, "Give a man 2 guns and he is God."
Well, I don't think, technically, I think if you give him slow-mo and a dive with some invincibility frames, he's God.
Okay. Right. Gotta have those iframes.
Yeah. But not just the 2 guns. But yeah, there's really not a lot to say about that. I mean, it only took me about probably 4 hours to get through, which for some people may be a little expensive because it is a $20 game. So you're paying, you know, in the universally accepted, value per hour ratio, you know, you're really only getting like $5 an hour.
There's no better method.
The other game, I don't know if anyone has any questions on the Hong Kong Massacre. It's pretty simple. It seems for a Steam game to be quite divisive. It's got like 73% positive on there, which, you know, that it seems like Steam people weren't loving it or had some problems with it. I think the boss fights were pretty stupid, and other than that, there were a couple of issues with some of like the dialogue. I don't know if the guy's the developer was a native-born speaker, or the studio is a native-born or American or English-speaking studio. But anyway. Not sure if I interrupted you there, Flex. I thought you were saying something.
Oh, no. I don't. Probably something.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory, right?
No, what I was saying is probably something dumb.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like simple. Nothing wrong with simple.
Yeah. And I guess
if it's done well and it connects with you, like, it looks fun.
Yeah, it's a good time. And so the next game that, although it takes a different viewpoint, I'd say it's also going to be in the running for my top 10 based on the stuff I've played so far this year is Katana Zero.
I am kind of interested in this. I've started wishlisting it because, or I've put it on my wish list just because I've seen it pop up so much in like, you know, news and things like that, or talk circles or whatever.
Yeah. It's also sort of a quick respawn, 1 hit to the enemies, 1 hit to you. You've got a dodge roll. You've got some slow-mo. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like the Hong Kong Massacre, but from a 2D perspective. I'd say overall, it's probably a more challenging game than the Hong Kong Massacre. For better or for worse, I think. And there are a lot more. There are a couple people, like there are dudes in the Hong Kong Massacre that take a couple hits to put down, like they're wearing like armor vests. And Katana Zero throws you different kinds of enemies. There are some guys who have, you want to deal with guys who have riot shields in a different way, guys who have assault rifles in a different way from guys who have shotguns, and then you've got a couple different dudes who use melee. And to me, that game was a lot about like paying attention to kind of like what resources you're given and what the environments look like and what type of enemies you're kind of coming up on. And the only things you can really do in Katana Zero, you've got your chop with your sword, you've got like some slow-mo and a dive, and then you have a throwable. And that's usually like, it could be like a vase or like a brick or just something that you find, and that usually is also one hit kill, and it can only usually be used once. But they do a lot with that aspect of it. Some of the things that you can pick up are like Molotovs. There's one that's like sort of a smoke grenade. And so there are times where you're coming up on these big group of guys with guns. And, by the way, you can reflect bullets in Katana Zero with your katana, which is pretty sweet. Throwing that out there. Usually for me, I've seen people like speed running the game who can reflect it without going into slow-mo, but that's a new level that I never reached.
Wow.
Yeah, they're just like chopping it back. And so that was, that's just a fun game. There's a lot of cool window dressing on it too. The whole thing has got this VHS tape aesthetic, and we're all around the same age, and we probably grew up watching VHS tape. So I don't know if the new generations, the millennial G's, Generation Z's know anything about VHS tapes like we do, the seasoned vets. But anyway, it's got this cool overlay there, and it also kind of rewind effects in the game. Whenever anyone is saying something in the dialogue and it's very, very meaningful, it'll like make this sort of like, it'll almost like punch the word at you. So it's like, what are you doing? And then like doing, it'll like make some sort of like, clap noise almost whenever it puts that word out there. And if someone's talking, and their dialogue box is above their character and you interrupt them, like the words shatter out of the box and fly across the screen, which really, like if you interrupt someone, I mean, that's the type of effect you're looking for, I mean, just absolutely
their
obliterate
words,
their train of thought.
to just spill out all over the game world.
Right. So it's also got some pretty cool tunes. The story is actually more interesting than I first gave it credit for. I think when I first started, I was like, this dude's a total goober wearing this kimono, but I kind of got into kind of a little bit more of the story. I think I was watching a video review of this game where someone was like, they said Katana Zero was very, very Devolver Digital, which I guess means that, you've got, some quick dying character, you've got some psychedelic funky drugs going on, some super violence, some secret project that involves violence in some way.
Some more violence, like some violence in the interrupting people's dialogue.
Right. You got to get a lot of violence in. And, but it was another game that just like really, really nailed the feel of the gameplay. So, I mean, if you prefer, like, I guess to me, this is kind of how I like to get my, like, when a lot of people say, well, I play games for like challenges, and some other people say, well, I play for the story. And I guess like when I'm trying to play like for a challenge, like this is sort of my preferred style, is this sort of like, very, very quick, instant respawn sort of, thing, I guess, where I get lots of information. A lot of these games will give you a lot of information. You kind of know what enemies, like for instance, a lot of times when you're walking and then you see a door, in Katana Zero, you already know what enemies are behind the door, and so you're like, well, okay, so I'm going to walk in here. this guy's going to shoot a shotgun. I know I can't reflect that because it's too many pellets. So I've got to do a dodge underneath that. And then there's a melee guy who's there. Let me grab this. And sometimes, like, while you're dodging, you can be grabbing a throwable off of a table and then throw that throwable at some other dude. And so it's kind of like you plan it out and then you execute it all pretty quickly, and then you stop and then you plan it out. And so it's very much, for some reason, it just really appeals to me. So
Nice.
So that's that. And so, yeah, I don't know, Ryan, if that sounded like what you're feeling, you know. I consider both of those, like, in whatever Williams score, whatever that means. I gave them both like 8.5s. I really like them both.
I mean, I'm glad to hear it comes highly recommended. Like, just my initial look at it, like, that's not really my aesthetic,
right?
I guess, like, but
so the VHS, you're more of a DVD man.
Yeah, you could say that, I guess.
You can actually see on the first I think when you actually look at the first trailer on the Steam page, you see him like go up some stairs and chop a dude, and the guy's in the middle of a talk, and all of his words go like flying everywhere.
They lean into like the just like busting things up.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a really fun game. The other one that I guess I wanted to throw out there, and it's been a minute since I've played it, but it's a game called Stardrop, and I'm almost positive I have not talked about this on the podcast. But basically, it is sort of a, I don't know, like a story-driven first-person kind of, I guess you'd call it an adventure game. But it's interesting because it kind of connects with me on a lot of the same levels as like your kind of Gone Home / Tacoma / Edith Finch type of thing. Like basically you are part of this company that goes out to these like derelict space vessels and tries to figure out kind of like what's going wrong with them or what happened with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, like, to me, it sets up such an interesting, like, it's almost like you could create a game that has like multiple, I guess a lot of games have elements like this. I mean, I guess in some ways, like, your Fallout vaults are this way. If you guys were ever into Fallouts, you know, like you go to one of the vaults, it's like, oh, you're at Vault 27. Let's see what sort of weird experiment that Vault Tech was running here, you know. And I guess Stardrop is sort of, you know, we work for the company that's just sort of ripe for seeing what happened on abandoned derelict space vessels. But it really, the things I guess that were surprising to me are the things that I liked the most. I thought the environments were kind of fantastic. Each of the different ships that you go on is very visually distinct. And there's also the characters that you interact with all have like pretty superb voice acting. I think the actual sci-fi tale itself is really good and really compelling. What actually did happen on this ship, I suppose. But yeah, I just wanted some more attention drawn to that. I mean, if people who, you know, if you're the type of person who finds that to be a really like compelling premise, like whenever you have to go and figure out like what happened somewhere, you know, after the fact. Last year, one of my favorite games was this game called Sagebrush, which was about visiting this cult compound years after and trying to figure out kind of what happened there. So something about that, I know maybe these are very, very, very William games, but something about that premise really, I guess, resonates with me, trying to figure out kind of like what went wrong here, almost like some sort of cultural archaeologist or something,
Yeah.
anthropologist. But yeah, you kind of do that in Stardrop. You find this abandoned ship and figure out kind of what sort of transpired, and it's very sci-fi and it's very interesting. But that's most of it.
Is that a game from this year or is it?
Yeah, it came out actually on Valentine's Day this year.
Aww.
Yeah, how romantic. But those three games, and then maybe also something like the Division 2, I think, or probably right now, those are at the top of my favorite games I've played this year. But there's still some things that I'm really wanting to play too, like your Resident Evil 2 remake and those sorts of things.
And Sekiro and
that may actually make appearances on my favorites list. Or
so Will, I have a burning question since you're talking about some of your potential 2019 favorites.
Burn it in.
Are you more of a Pokemon Sword guy or a Pokemon Shield guy?
I don't even know what that means. Is this?
I think that means both, Ryan.
So
Okay.
are you not picking starter characters now? You now have starter characters and a weapon?
I'm more of a Pokemon shotgun guy.
Wait. Is that the dichotomy? Like red and blue, it's sword and shield?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the red blue.
Okay. My bad. Anytime I see Pokemon, my eyes just glaze over and I zone out. So I don't know what's happening with that series. I'm sure.
So you can't decide.
Yeah, I'm sure our buddy Nate would love to hear exactly how enthused I am about it. But but yeah, so those games were pretty good. At the moment, I'm working through Horizon Zero Dawn, the Frozen Wilds DLC, and that is hard. And that's all I'll really say about that right now.
Is that a standalone thing, or did you load back up your save from?
Yeah, I grabbed a complete edition for like $10 somewhere, and then I just put the disc in, and it included the Frozen Wilds, and it let me just grab my. And part of the reason that it's so brutal is that the last thing I had done in Horizon Zero Dawn was replayed the main game on the very hard difficulty, and I guess it locks it in because now I can't change it, and I'm having to play this Frozen Wilds content with it, and these dudes do not mess around.
Yeah.
I just had to take out like 4 demonic scrap jaws, those like alligator robots. And that was an ordeal.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's what's been going on in William World. So Hong Kong Massacre, Katana Zero, and Stardrop are fantastic games that came out this year. And the Frozen Wilds is hard.
And
how about you, Flex?
So I mean, probably the game I spent the most time on since our last podcast is Sekiro. But we have done a full spoiler cast on that, so I will refrain from speaking more of that. I am currently in the middle of a New Game Plus of that. So I've kept the train rolling.
Nice.
I also played through Ape Out.
How'd you like that?
It was all right.
I've been on the fence for like months on that game.
Yeah, I think it's worth playing. I found it worth playing. I don't know that I loved it. And it's also a very short game. So, that may be wait until the sale price looks good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the coolest thing about Ape Out is all the stylistic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like the art style, and the reactive soundtrack is really fascinating.
Right.
It's actually a lot of the concepts I was talking about with Tetris Effect last year about how its soundtrack reacts to your actions, and
right.
its soundtrack becomes part of the experience in a way where most games are the soundtrack just plays in the background. Mm-hmm. And the art's also the visuals, the flash and shake and stuff, which is a little more common in games, but both the visuals and the audio are both very stylized and react to your play in a way that is really cool. And to me, that's the thing with this game, because the actual action is, I don't know, it's very simple, and I guess I didn't find it that engaging.
Yeah. And I guess I was thinking between the procedural generation and the way that the action works in that game, I guess I was curious, would you say, the kind of rhythm I was talking about earlier with, where you sort of plan and then execute and then plan and then execute. It almost seemed like Ape Out was more just like all action all the time.
Yeah, pretty much. It's really hard to plan in Ape Out because, I don't know how they've done their procedural generation. I don't know if it's like tile sets or whatever, but it's because it's different every time. You can't really plan that well. Right. And you also, like, you don't have different weapons or anything like that. Like, your ape and his abilities never change.
Right.
So there's there's not really different ways to approach things.
So you can't put like a cat mask on your ape.
No, absolutely not. A horse mask maybe, but
okay,
not a cat mask.
Right.
But I mean, like the action feels good. It's like the options you have available, like your main options are just push or grab. So like you can grab a person and use them as a shield, and when you do that, they will immediately fire their gun away from you. So you can do things like quickly grab someone, point them in the direction of another enemy, their reaction shot will shoot them, and then you can point in the direction of another enemy and throw the one you have grabbed into that one, and they will explode in a glorious bloody mess, which looks cool. So like you can do things like that, and like it very much is like the game has a very fast pace to it where you're basically never, like, at least the way I played, like I was almost never stopped moving and just constantly reacting to what's right around you and making very split-second decisions just constantly.
Right.
Like this game to me definitely feels more, like you were saying, more action, split-second action, just nonstop. And like it is satisfying and entertaining to like get through a level and mow down dudes, and they do a good enough job, I think, of shaking up the like enemy variety and the weapons they have. So like pistols, shotguns, rifles, sniper rifles, flamethrowers, rocket launchers, like you have to respond differently to different weapon types, because like a rocket launcher is a one-hit kill on you straight up. But you do not want to get hit by that.
And that seems true to life. I think if you shot a gorilla with a rocket launcher, take care of
it. Yeah.
I mean, if Resident Evil has taught me anything, pretty much nothing can, at least no creature,
no non-Western person,
no living thing can withstand a rocket launcher blast.
Right.
But yeah, and then like, the flamethrower guys, they're trying to get close to you. The sniper rifle guys are trying to get away from you. The shotgun has more of a spread. The weapons behave how you would expect, but they add variety into how you have to respond to them, which is nice.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it was short and fun. I didn't love it, but it was, I enjoyed, I'm glad I played it.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, I got two other things to talk about. First, let's go with this. I played through Castlevania Portrait of Ruin.
Which platform?
That's a DS game.
Okay. What's the verdict?
It was okay. It was a very well-made Castlevania that like didn't really have any big missteps, but also didn't really stand out compared to all of the other Castlevanias, if that makes sense.
And that's kind of in this world of post Symphony of the Night, like more ARPG-ish Castlevanias. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. This game has two, like, it's kind of things that it tries to differentiate itself. Because, this is very much in the Symphony of the Night line. Because, you had Symphony on the PS1, then you had 3 GBA games and 3 DS games, and all 6 of those, like, kind of followed in that template for the most part. Portrait of Ruin, the thing it does that no other Castlevania game I've played does is you control 2 characters and you can swap between them at any time. It's just kind of like a fast swap. And the other one is following you around and can help out. And you actually have like joint attacks you can do and that kind of stuff. And the two characters, like the guy is more of a physical guy. So, he equips your like traditional, like the kind of weapons you're used to equipping in Castlevania games. Like he can equip whips or swords or spears or whatever. And then the woman is more of a mage, so she has a lot of spells and stuff. So like instead of the guy, his special attacks are your traditional Castlevania special attacks. He's got the art hammer throw, he's got the dart, he's got the holy water, he's got those typical sub-weapons, and then the woman has magic spells instead of that. So they kind of walk your traditional fighter wizard line split. And then the other thing they do is the castle itself is not as big as most of the games in this mold, but then they have so the game's called Portrait of Ruin, and spread throughout the castle there are these portraits that you can enter them like Mario 64 style, and they take you to like a different level that's its own standalone level with a different art theme, that kind of stuff. Which I don't know. I kind of, that strikes a weird middle ground to me where it's like, the pre-Symphony of the Night Castlevanias were traditional level-based action games, and then most of the post-Symphony of the Night ones, you just have one single sprawling castle. This one kind of splits the difference in a way that, like, I don't know, ends up being as good as either. Like, I almost just rather than pick one and stick to it. But I mean, it was fine. It wasn't like, I don't know. It's not like it fell apart or anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I'm trying to think of games that have sort of like, it almost sounds like sort of a hub world type thing, but maybe
kind of, yeah,
a little too much emphasis in the hub world, or like the hub world is almost like a mini Metroidvania type thing, or
yeah, because the hub world, like, it is a castle, and you do spend like half your time in the hub world, probably at least. It's just by virtue of being a smaller castle than the other games, it just doesn't stand out as interesting to me, the castle part of it. So that's just my personal preferences. I'd rather them either just pick just the castle and make it a bigger castle, or make the whole game just a string of action levels. But maybe kind of the hybrid worked well for some people. I'm not sure. I think the reception for this game was pretty good at the time. But yeah, like, my overall feeling of it is mostly like it was a good game. Like, it was well made. It was fun to play. It just didn't necessarily, for me, stand out as like anything special because they made a bunch of Castlevania games in that style. So it more suffers by comparison to the other games. Like, on its own, it's a perfectly good game.
And I guess it sounded like you've played maybe all of those other games now?
Yes. So that was the main reason I actually brought this up, is I had years ago set out on a personal quest to play what I consider all of the quote-unquote core Castlevania games. And this was the final one. This is the one that finished off that journey, so to speak.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. I have. You can call me Mr. Castlevania. Thank you.
Flex. No problem, Castle. We can start calling you Castlevania Flex or something like that.
Yep, you got it. Yeah. So that was kind of my main impetus for playing it, was rounding out the last of the Castlevanias.
Well, that's pretty cool. So have you done a ranking list, like a personal ranking list?
I did. I posted it in our Discord not that long ago.
I may need to check that, because I remember you saying that you had played them all, but I don't remember if I had a chance to look at your list, your ordered list yet. Although I think I know what's number one.
Number one, if you paid attention, has probably not come as a shocker.
Yeah.
over the years.
You seem to be a big fan of, is it Rondo of Blood?
You got it.
Yeah.
Rondo of Blood's pretty cool. And honestly, I like most of the Castlevania. Some of the older ones are a little hard to go back to. Particularly Castlevania 2.
Oh, here's a hot take. So where do you think the Curse of the Moon game falls in if you were to include it as a core 2D Castlevania?
It would be up there. It would be near the top. I don't know. I'd have to think on that. I can't. I can't do that off the cusp.
No hot takes today, folks.
I put thought into these rankings. I can't. I gotta.
Not even Mr. Castlevania. He can't even do it.
Look, if I was Mr. Bloodstained, maybe.
We'll save the hot takes then.
All right. It would be in the top third. Sure. I like Curse of the Moon quite a bit.
That one seems pretty legit. So
yeah. But yeah, that was satisfying to kind of wrap that up. And Portrait of the Root was fun. I think Portrait of the Ruin suffers more in comparison to the other Castlevania games of that style because it was one of the last ones of that style that came out. So I think it was a little bit of just like that formula was getting a little repetitive at that point. And even if it was a perfectly well made game, it just, I don't know, felt like it needed something else.
And I guess they also, Konami also kind of slowed way down on making those games, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, they basically stopped. So Symphony of the Night came out in 97. Order of Ecclesia came out in 2008. So from 97 to 2008, they made 7 of those games. And 2008 was the last one of them. So they made 7 in about a decade and then just stopped altogether.
And there were a few 3D ones, but
there were a few 3D ones since then, the Lords of Shadow games. But in terms of the ones I was looking to play, which were the 2D ones, I'm pretty sure 2008 was the last 2D one, unless you count the Lords of Shadow 3DS game, which I didn't care to play. Other than that, I've been bouncing around, kind of poking at some other random stuff here and there. I guess the only thing I'll touch on is I tried out a pair of, I guess, old school style CRPGs. One of them more older school than the other. So I played probably about half a dozen hours of Divinity Original Sin 2, which is the newer one of the 2 games I'm going to talk about. And I enjoyed what I played of that a fair amount. I found myself wishing I had built a different, once I learned how the game worked, I felt myself wishing I had built another, built my character differently. I feel like that game needed one of those abilities sections that some games have where you play for an hour or two and then it asks you to make your character. So you kind of get to see how some of the systems work because you spend this or at least I spent this hour-long process or something. And this is not unique to this game. A lot of RPGs have this problem. Spend upwards of an hour reading all these character choices and not understanding how they actually work in the game, and then play the game for a couple hours and oh, this is what that meant. This is how this works. So kind of felt myself wishing I could change some things. And the game has some other typical inventory management, quest log, that stuff that can be a hassle, but the actual combat of that game is really fun. And that seems to be the real standout. I think at this point I'm going to hold off on playing more because it sounds like Nate, who's not on the panel today, and I may co-op that at some point. And I think that may be a more enjoyable way to play that.
It's interesting that they made those games like co-op kind of a big part of those games. It's kind of cool. Because when I was growing up playing games like Baldur's Gate, it was kind of hard to play those co-op. So
yeah, I've always felt co-op would be a weird way to go with these kind of games, like your Baldur's Gates of the world, like you said, because they seem so story-driven and based around your choices and stuff like that. But I think it's a combination of like this game's story, from what I've seen, does not take itself very seriously. So it's not really something where you're going to, like, at least me, I have not felt drawn to like sit down and read a bunch. And then on top of that, the way its combat is, unlike some of those other games that are more like, they're kind of real time, but you can pause and plan things, which I think would be trickier in co-op to like coordinate your abilities. This game is purely turn-based, so that will make it easier, I think. But also, I just think the way I don't really know quite how to describe it, but the combat in this game is very, very tactical in a way where you need to kind of consider all of the environmental details, all of your abilities, like all of the enemies, what they're capable of, in a way that I think it would be really fun to strategize through that with a partner. And I think as one person controlling a party and like a bunch of enemies on the screen and so many environmental details, like it's almost kind of overwhelming. And like, I think if you could coordinate abilities and strategies with someone else, I think that would make it more enjoyable. That's kind of how I've come away from the couple of hours I've spent with it feeling. So I think I might hold off and end up doing that with Nate if we get around to it. And on top of that, then I was like, okay, well, I've wanted to try, speaking of Baldur's Gate, Baldur's Gate 2 is always, you hear, or at least I always see it referred to as one of the best games ever made. So I was like, all right, I don't know that I'll make it all the way through. As a lot with my backlog games, I don't necessarily sit down with the intent of playing all the way through them, because most of them are like 60 plus hours. But I at least want to play enough to understand them and like get a sense for what people like about them. And also a lot of these are old, so like playing 60 plus hours of really old games is sometimes very trying.
Yeah.
And so I started playing Baldur's Gate 2, and this was where our D&D references came in earlier, because that game is straight up advanced D&D, which I've played a lot of pen and paper D&D, but I started with 3rd edition, which is very different from AD&D. So I got to learn about things like ATACS 0 to hit armor class 0 and other fun AD&D rules, which some of them I still haven't quite figured out. But I've only played like an hour or so of Baldur's Gate 2. Made my character, and I think I'm basically out of like a tutorial. You like start imprisoned in a dungeon and you're escaping. And
did you meet Minsk?
I did. He's in the very first room of the game.
Yep. Jump on my sword while you can, evil.
Yeah, he seems like a fun time. Oh man. But man, so similar to Divinity Original Sin 2, I spent, time up front making my character. And then I go and the start of the game, you're in a cell, you get out, you break Minsk out, and there's someone else in a cell. And then you go in the next room over, and it's all of there's all this gear in this room. And I probably spent a good 20, 30 minutes running back and forth between the chest, which had the armor, and the table, which had the weapons, trying to equip all 4 of my party members with appropriate armor, and just like poking through menus, managing inventory, because they do not make that smooth at all. It was a hassle. Yeah, and it's like, I know it's just a product of this game being from like 2000 or whenever it came out, but the interface stuff in that game is definitely old, definitely clunky. So I like, it's kind of why I stopped playing. I was like, I just do not feel in the mood for dealing with this old shit right now. I will come back to this when I'm in a better mood for it.
It's been a long time since I've played too, but I mean, from what I remember, like, it has, I'd like to say it has some of the standard, like, modern CRPG elements where it's like, if you hold the Alt key, it shows you everything you can interact with. And like, I mean, pretty much when you click on a container, it like opens up that inventory and you can like open up your character menu and like drag things over to the, I mean, is that the experience you had, or is it something a little different?
Yeah, I mean, that's I have played clunkier.
I'm sure, yeah, like more modern games like offer things like auto equip and auto sort and some pretty, nice upgrades that are that smooth out some of that experience. I was just curious, like, if
no, I mean, how you're describing it is pretty much how it works. It's the little things that make it tedious. It's like, okay, I can only carry so many things. I can't trade between party members. I can't, like, I can't compare stats very easily. So I have to constantly equip, unequip. Like, cool tips and indicators are not very clear. It's just stuff like that. It's little things. Like, when you actually look at the interface, like if you see a screenshot, you're like, oh, okay, like that looks more or less like what modern games are. But it's just the fiddly little details that are just like not quite as smooth as they could be. And I think it's mostly the initial equipping of everyone at once that felt like a lot. I think like once I actually get into the game and I'm only like equipping things as I pick up new gear, like it won't feel like it'll be fine. I think it was just that initial thing. The really tricky part was like, at least I could not figure out any clear way to transfer items between party members. So it was like, if I wanted to see how equipping, I don't know, some sword or something on each individual party member, like how it looked like stats wise on each of them, I would have to like put it on one person, take it off, drop it on the ground, switch to control of the other person, pick it up, put it on, check out the stats, take it off, unequip, put on the ground, switch to control to another person. Like, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
That's funny. I don't remember that, but I could definitely see it.
So when you have 4 characters who have 0 gear on them and you all of a sudden open a room with chests full of basic gear and you need to equip your people.
There's a bit of an initial setup cost. Yeah. I also remember too, because I think Minsk is a ranger.
Yes.
And like the ranger, the optimal weapons for a ranger always confuse me. Because I think they can use like a lot of different types of weapons, including bows and arrows. But I feel like maybe I spec'd him more for like melee dual wielding.
Yeah, so this is the other thing I spent a lot of my time doing, was like looking through stat sheets and menus and stuff, because just trying to understand the system. So I feel like I wasn't going to play both Baldur's Gate games, and 2
no, the original is like, I mean, 2 probably feels pretty clunky by today's standards, but I did play through the original, and this was like 10 or 12 years ago, and like you don't get your first boots of haste in that game until like level 6 or 7, when you cap at level 8. And like I was amazed at just how much slower the game felt, because I seem to remember in Baldur's Gate 2, like pretty early on, like maybe shortly after the first dungeon, you can buy and equip like things like Boots of Haste and just have all your party members like constantly hasted.
Yeah.
So
That'll be nice, because right now I feel like I move fairly slow, but
yeah,
like it's not unbearable, but it would be nice to get something a little faster.
When you're playing 30, 40, 50 hours of it,
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, when I was looking through like character sheets, it looks like Minsk already has skill points in 2-weapon fighting.
Okay.
If I understand all the skill systems stuff right. The other thing is all of my characters start at like level 7 or 8. So it sounds like that was maybe the cap in Baldur's Gate 1.
Yeah. It was, I think, level 8.
Yeah, so it seems like they just go ahead and start you out that high in this game.
Yeah, I think if you had played Baldur's Gate 1, you could load up.
You could import
character, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I saw an import option. It's kind of interesting that people were doing that back in, the late 90s. But I mean, otherwise, like other than like the fiddly menu stuff and just not like, because they don't tutorialize any of the D&D. Like I feel like they expect you are familiar with AD&D coming into that game. So that's the other part that's like getting up to speed, is just like, all right, I'm familiar with modern D&D, but not this D&D. So just trying to get up to speed with that a little bit. But I feel like I can definitely feel. So the oldest BioWare game I've played is Knights of the Old Republic. Before this, actually, no, Neverwinter Nights was the oldest one I played before trying Baldur's Gate 2, and I can definitely like tell like this is a BioWare game. And just in like the tone and style of like the writing and the way the story is starting off and like that kind of stuff, and like that in a way is kind of exciting. So like I'm curious to see like if the story ends up getting its hooks in me, I could potentially get all the way through this game. I think that's going to be the big question mark on this one.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean you're definitely right. Like because Baldur's Gate 2 was probably one of the first BioWare games I played, maybe the first BioWare game I played. And, it sparked my interest. Mm-hmm. And I ended up playing like Icewind Dale, like I think maybe both of those, and like Baldur's Gate 1, and, of course, like Neverwinter Nights, like and KOTOR, and like they definitely have some familiar elements that you start to pick up on. I do remember BG2 being like kind of one of their stronger games overall, though.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. So, what did you choose to roll?
I'm a fighter.
Fighter?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Because everything. So, here's my thought process on this. Uh-huh. Everything I've heard about old D&D is that fighters are overpowered.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? This is going to be an old game. I'm going to be learning stuff anyway. I'm like, I don't want to overcomplicate this. I'm going to make a fighter.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're basically right. I mean, I played a paladin, and you have some ranger characters, access to ranger characters, and they're fine. It just always feels like the fighters just get, because those characters are so weapon focused, and like all those little niceties they get don't compensate for the fact that the fighters just get like, hey, be really awesome with every weapon. Like,
yeah,
you want to use a 2-handed sword? Well, you can like, you can get like 5 feats in that, and like the rangers can only get like 3. But also, is it just the base game, or does it include the expansion?
So I'm actually playing the enhanced edition, which does include the expansion, and there was something else in it. When you start up the game, there are 3 things to choose from. There's Shadows of Throne of Baal, which is the expansion, and there was a third thing that now I can't remember what it was.
Okay, huh. I wonder, maybe there was like some new update or something they released.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a newer thing.
I feel like, was that a game that got like semi-recent DLC or something?
I feel like that's what it might be, is that it like got more modern DLC.
Yeah, that might be the case, because Throne of Baal was the old expansion, and it added like some like specialized classes, which were kind of interesting. Some of those were quite good, but yeah. Cool. I'll be curious to hear if you stick with it and how you end up liking it.
Yeah, that one will likely be a very slow burn for me. Kind of like as I'm in the mood. But like just other than the initial hump getting over it, like I like BioWare's games from that era, so like it seems potentially really cool. But that's pretty much it for me. And with that, we might call this a podcast. What do you guys got coming up in the near future? What's on your plate, Ryan?
Well, I guess I'm, probably approaching halfway in the messenger, so I was gonna, and that seems pretty short, so I'll probably, push through that pretty quickly. Over this weekend, I guess this is Memorial Day weekend too, I was debating on starting either Octopath Traveler or Final Fantasy XII. Seems like a good time to start like sort of a console RPG.
Yeah. It's kind of where I was at starting the RPGs I started is like I feel like we're in a lull in releases right now. It seems like a good time for it.
Yeah, it's like I've cleaned off some stuff from my backlog. Like, I've taken at least a short break from Final Fantasy XIV, so it's like good time to like pick up something a little beefier. And other than that, I'm still chewing on, depending on how much free time I have this weekend and where I'm at, I'm still debating on whether or not I want to pick up Final Fantasy XIV and keep that train rolling or just give it a rest until the expansion comes out in about a month.
Nice. Cool. What you got going on, Will?
Well, probably going to try and work my way through this Frozen Wilds in the Horizon Zero Dawn. I've been playing a game called Spellforce 3 co-op on PC, which is sort of like this weird RPG RTS hybrid thing. And then I tried Dauntless for the first time last night.
Wait.
On PS4.
Wait.
That's like a Monster Hunter-y thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
You sound thrilled about it.
Well, I don't know that it really brings anything new to the yet, like at least from what I've played. I only put in maybe two and a half hours, but so far it seems very much like we're trying to make a free-to-play Monster Hunter.
Right.
Are you just playing that to experiment or to scratch the same itch, or do you have somebody you're playing with?
Mainly because it's free and just to see what it is. But I mean, if it really kind of gets its hooks in us, maybe I can see us kind of doing some more of it. But we'll see.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, Ryan, if you want to hop on there and download you some Dauntless, we'll probably be on there sometime.
Does it have
add you to the text chain?
Does it have a hunting horn?
I think it's got 6 weapons. It's like something they call chain blades, which are not like Kratos' chain blades, so that's a little disappointing. A pike, a pistol, a big old sword, a hammer, and an axe, I think. I think those are all the weapons. So not quite as many as Monster Hunter. But
bummer.
Yeah. All right. But that's probably what I'm going to be getting into.
Cool. As for me, I am in the middle of a Sekiro New Game Plus, which I mentioned earlier. That game goes fast the second time through.
Is it harder or?
Oh, it is way easier.
Okay. I kind of wondered if like after you have all the core abilities, if it would just be like a kind of a breeze.
Yeah, I've probably played it like 5-ish hours, give or take, and I'm at Senpu Temple.
Okay.
I feel like I'm like halfway through the game, and I'm just like I see a crowd of enemies. I'm like, whatever. I'll just run in and murder everything in like 2 seconds. It's so different this time around versus the It's like the first time I was just so slow doing everything, and everything was challenging, and like every enemy was threatening, and we were just like moving very slowly. And now I'm just running in, just slashing everything, and they're dying fast.
And so, do you know that does the New Game Plus, like, it doesn't bump the difficulty up like some New Game Pluses? It's just like
it does bump the difficulty up. It just doesn't seem proportional to my power increase.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and you were kind of completionist as well, right?
Yeah, I was very completionist, so it could be partially that. And I wouldn't be surprised if the back part of the game catches up with me. But the early areas, at least, are just like nothing as a threat. I mean, the stuff is giving more money and more experience for skill points and that kind of stuff. So like they've clearly scaled up the enemies. It's just it's not enough. Yeah. I also just think knowledge counts for a lot in that game. So me just knowing, like having the experience of fighting all those things before, just makes it easier as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see, like, even if it was easy, even if they didn't adjust the difficulty at all, like I could still see it, because I didn't get all the endings and everything. I could see it being kind of fun to just blast through the game and try and find a few more secrets.
Yeah, I mainly want to try because there's a different ending that has different final bosses, and I mainly want to see that. Kind of the main.
Are you going to become the Shura?
Mm-hmm. You got it. And then, as mentioned, just barely started Baldur's Gate 2, so I'll probably keep poking at that. And that should be more than enough to tide me over until Mario Maker 2 comes out in a month. So.
Sweet. Big year for Nintendo.
Mm-hmm. They got a lot of games coming. And with that, I think that's going to make a podcast. I have been Flex, joined by Ryan and Will. We are going to sign off. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.